My father turned 60 on a cold morning in November. I remember it because he woke up before anyone else in the house, walked outside barefoot into the frost, and stood there looking at the sky for a long time. I was watching him from the window. I was maybe 20 at the time, and I didn't understand what he was doing. I thought maybe he was praying. Maybe he was counting the stars before the sun took them away. But when he came back inside and I asked him what he was doing out there, he looked at me and said something I have carried with me my entire life. He said, "I was introducing myself to the man I am going to become. I've been one thing for 60 years. Now I have to learn how to be something else." I didn't understand that then. I was 20. 60 sounded ancient. It sounded like the end of something, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff looking down. But my father didn't look like a man at the edge of anything. He looked like a man at the beginning. And now that I have passed 60 myself, now that I have stood in my own frost on my own cold morning and felt the shift that he was feeling, I understand exactly what he meant. 60 is not the end. 60 is not even the middle. 60 is the moment when life finally stops pretending and starts telling you the truth. And the first truth it tells you is this: everything you spent the first 60 years chasing does not matter the way you thought it did. The career, the money, the house, the status, the reputation, the things you accumulated and the titles you earned and the approval you fought so hard to win, none of it matters the way you thought it would. I'm not saying it was wasted. I'm not saying those things have no value. I'm saying that when you reach 60, the weight of those things changes. They get lighter, and the things you ignored, the things you put off, the things you said you'd get to someday, those get heavier. The conversation you never had with your son, the apology you never made to your brother, the dream you buried when you were 35 because someone told you it was impractical. The quiet moments you rushed through because you were always on your way to somewhere more important. Those things start to press on your chest after 60, not as regrets, as invitations. Life is saying, you still have time. Not unlimited time, but enough. Enough to do the things that actually matter. Let me tell you what I have observed about people who reach 60. They fall into two groups. The first group looks backward. They spend their days thinking about what they used to be, how strong they used to be, how fast they used to be, how needed they used to be. They talk about the past like it was a country they were exiled from, and every day they wake up and measure the distance between who they are now and who they were then, and that distance makes them feel small. It makes them feel like life is shrinking, like every year is just another step toward disappearing. The second group looks forward, not with the desperate ambition of a young person chasing a future they can't see, but with the calm curiosity of someone who knows that every day is a gift, and they intend to unwrap it slowly. These are the people who start painting at 63, who learn a new language at 67, who plant a garden at 70 knowing they might not see every tree grow tall, but planting it anyway because the planting itself is the point. These people don't shrink, they expand. And the difference between these two groups is not health, it's not money, it's not luck, it's perspective. It's the story they tell themselves about what this chapter of life means. My mother was in the second group. She lived to be 89 years old, and she was more alive at 85 than most people are at 30. When she turned 60, she told me something that made me laugh at the time, but I think about it almost every day now. She said, "I spent 60 years learning what everyone else wanted me to know. Now I'm going to spend the rest learning what I want to know." And she did. She started studying plants, not in a book, not in a classroom. She walked the land every single morning for hours, examining roots and leaves and bark and soil. She talked to the plants like they were old friends. She would come home with dirt under her fingernails and a look in her eyes like she had just discovered something extraordinary. And when people would ask her what she was doing, she would say, "I'm going to school. My classroom just doesn't have walls." She learned more in those last 29 years than she had learned in the first 60. Not because the information was better, because she was finally learning for herself, not for a teacher, not for a job, not for approval, for the pure joy of knowing something she didn't know yesterday. And that joy kept her young, not physically young. Her body aged the way all bodies age, but her eyes stayed bright, her mind stayed sharp, her spirit stayed hungry. And I believe with everything in me that it was because she never stopped being a student of life. Here is something that nobody tells you about getting older. They tell you about the losses. They tell you about the things that slow down and the things that stop working and the things you can't do anymore. But nobody tells you about the things you gain. Nobody tells you that after 60, you stop caring about things that used to keep you up at night. The opinions of people who don't matter to you, the pressure to perform, the need to prove yourself in every room you walk into, the constant measuring of yourself against other men and other women to see if you're winning or losing some invisible race. All of that falls away. Not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. You've realized that the race was never real, that there was no finish line, that the only person you were ever competing with was yourself, and you finally decided to stop fighting and start living. That is what 60 gives you. It gives you freedom. The freedom to be exactly who you are without apology. The freedom to say no to things that drain you and yes to things that fill you up. The freedom to sit in silence without feeling like you should be doing something productive. The freedom to look at a sunset and let it be enough. That freedom is worth more than anything you had at 30. I want to talk about something that I see happening to too many people over 60, and it breaks my heart every time I see it. They start to believe they are useless. They start to believe that because they are no longer working the way they used to, because their bodies are slower, because the world has moved on to new technologies and new ideas and new ways of doing things, that they have nothing left to offer. And the world reinforces this. The world puts you in a category: senior, elderly, retired. And those words, even though they seem harmless, they carry a hidden message. The message is, your time is done. Step aside. Let the young ones handle it now. And too many people over 60 believe that message. They step aside. They shrink. They sit in their chairs and watch the world go by and convince themselves that they are just waiting now, waiting for the end. And I want to tell you something with every bit of strength I have in my voice. That is a lie. That is the biggest lie the modern world tells its elders, and it is killing people. Not physically, spiritually. It is draining the life out of people who still have oceans of wisdom inside them. In our tradition, the elders are the most important people in the community. Not the warriors, not the hunters, not the young and the strong and the fast. The elders. Because the elders carry something that no one else has. They carry memory. They carry experience. They carry the stories that hold the community together. They carry the mistakes they made so that the young ones don't have to make them again. They carry the knowledge of what works and what doesn't, what matters and what doesn't, what lasts and what fades. Without the elders, a community loses its roots. It becomes a tree with no foundation, and the first strong wind knocks it over. Our people understood this. We built our entire social structure around the wisdom of the old. The elders sat at the center of every decision, every conflict, every ceremony. Not because they were perfect, not because they had all the answers, but because they had lived long enough to know which questions to ask. And that is something that cannot be taught in any school. It can only be earned through years of living. You have earned that. If you are over 60, you have earned something that no young person can buy or fake or shortcut their way to. You have earned perspective. You know what a broken heart feels like, and you know that it heals. You know what failure feels like, and you know that it teaches. You know what loss feels like, and you know that love survives it. You know what fear feels like, and you know that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep moving anyway. Every scar on your body and every ache in your bones is a diploma. Every sleepless night you survived is a degree. Every time you got knocked down and stood back up, you were earning a qualification that no university in the world can grant. You are not useless. You are the most qualified person in any room you walk into, and the world needs what you carry, desperately. I want to tell you about a man I knew named Joseph. Joseph was a quiet man who worked with his hands his whole life. He built fences, he built barns, he built homes. He was not a rich man, he was not a famous man. Nobody outside our community knew his name. And when Joseph turned 65, his hands started to fail him. Arthritis crept into his fingers like frost. The grip that had held a hammer for 40 years started to loosen. And Joseph, who had defined himself by his work, by the things his hands could build, fell into a deep sadness. He felt like his purpose had been taken from him. He felt like the one thing he was good at had been stolen by time. And he sat in that sadness for almost a year. He barely left his house. He barely spoke to anyone. His family worried about him. They thought they were losing him. And then one spring morning, his granddaughter came to visit. She was maybe 7 years old, and she asked him to tell her a story. Just like that. "Grandpa, tell me a story." And Joseph, who hadn't felt useful in months, sat down with that little girl and started talking. He told her about building his first barn when he was 19. He told her about the time a wall collapsed, and he had to rebuild it 3 times before it stood straight. He told her about the sound a good piece of wood makes when you run your hand across the grain. And that little girl sat there with her eyes wide open, completely absorbed, like he was telling her the most important thing she had ever heard. And when he finished, she said, "Grandpa, can you teach me how to build something?" And Joseph cried. Right there in front of his 7-year-old granddaughter, this tough old man who had built 100 barns broke down and cried. Because he realized that his hands weren't the gift. The knowledge was the gift. The experience was the gift. The stories were the gift. And those things didn't need strong hands. They just needed someone willing to listen. Joseph spent the last 12 years of his life teaching, not in the school, on his porch, in his yard, at the kitchen table. He taught his grandchildren how to measure wood, how to read the grain, how to respect the material you're working with. He taught them patience and precision and the satisfaction of making something with your own 2 hands. And those children carry his teachings with them to this day. Joseph didn't stop building. He just changed what he was building. Instead of barns, he was building people. That is what I want you to understand. Your purpose doesn't expire at 60. It transforms. The way a river transforms when it reaches the flatlands. It doesn't stop flowing. It spreads out. It slows down. It feeds a wider area. It becomes more generous. That is what you are doing now. You are spreading out.
You are slowing down not because you are weak, but because you have more to give, and you need to give it carefully.
A young river rushes. It crashes over rocks. It's exciting, but it's narrow. An old river is wide and deep and calm, and it feeds everything it touches. You are the old river, and everything around you is waiting to be fed. Let me tell you another truth that nobody over 60 wants to hear, but everybody over 60 needs to hear. You are running out of time. I don't say that to scare you. I say that to wake you up. Because too many people over 60 live as if they have forever. They put things off. They say, I'll do it next year. I'll call my daughter next week. I'll visit that place I've always wanted to see when the weather gets better. I'll tell my old friend what they meant to me when the right moment comes. And the right moment doesn't come. And next year becomes the year after that. And the call doesn't get made. And the trip doesn't happen. And the words don't get said. And one day the window closes and everything you meant to do is still sitting inside you unfinished. Do not let that happen. You have today. You might have tomorrow. You probably have next month and maybe next year and maybe 10 more years or 20 more years, but you don't know. Nobody knows. And that not knowing is not a reason to be afraid. It's a reason to be urgent, not frantic. Urgent. There is a difference. Frantic is running around doing everything at once because you're scared. Urgent is choosing the things that matter most and doing them now, today, with your full heart, because you understand that now is all you are guaranteed. I want to talk about the body for a moment, because I know that for many of you over 60, the body has become a source of frustration. Things hurt that didn't used to hurt. Things that were easy are now difficult. You look in the mirror and you don't recognize the person looking back at you. The face has changed. The hands have changed. The way you move through the world has changed. And it's easy to feel betrayed by that. It's easy to feel like your body is turned against you, like it's failing you. But I want you to think about it differently. I want you to think about what your body has done for you. This body carried you through 60 years of living. It carried your children when they were small. It held the people you loved when they needed to be held. It worked in the heat and the cold. It got up every morning even when it didn't want to. It fought through sickness. It healed from injuries. It kept your heart beating through every joy and every heartbreak and every ordinary Tuesday for more than 60 years without you ever having to ask it to. Your body is not failing you. Your body is tired, and it has earned the right to be tired. So instead of cursing it for what it can no longer do, try thanking it for what it has already done. Put your hand on your chest right now. Feel that heartbeat. That heart has beaten more than 2 billion times to keep you alive. 2 billion, without stopping, without taking a day off, without asking for recognition. Your body is the most loyal friend you have ever had. Treat it that way. There is something I want to say about fear, because I think fear is the real enemy of people over 60, not aging, not illness, not loneliness. Fear. The fear that the best is behind you. The fear that you are becoming irrelevant. The fear that you will be a burden to the people you love. The fear that you will lose your mind before you lose your body. The fear that you will die without having done the thing you were put here to do. I know these fears because I have felt every single one of them. They visit me in the quiet hours before dawn when the house is dark and the mind is too awake. And I have learned something about fear over the years that I wish someone had told me when I was younger. Fear is not a prophet. Fear does not know the future. Fear takes the worst possible outcome and presents it to you as if it is the only possible outcome. And it is lying. It is always lying. Because the future has not been written yet, and you still hold the pen. Every morning you wake up is another page. And you get to decide what goes on it. Not fear. You. The fear will whisper. Let it whisper, but do not let it write your story. There is an old teaching among our people about the two wolves. You may have heard a version of this before, but I want to tell it to you the way it was told to me. An elder was sitting with his grandchild, and the grandchild said, "Grandfather, sometimes I feel two things fighting inside me. One makes me want to give up, and the other makes me want to keep going. Which one is going to win?" And the elder said, "The one you feed." That's the whole teaching. 2 sentences. But it contains everything you need to know about how to live past 60. Every day you wake up, 2 voices are fighting inside you. One says it's too late. The other says there's still time. One says you're too old. The other says you're old enough to finally know what matters. One says sit down. The other says stand up. The one you listen to, the one you give your attention and your energy and your belief to, that is the one that will shape the rest of your life. Feed the right wolf. Starve the other one. It is that simple and that difficult. I also want to say something about legacy, because I think a lot of people over 60 get anxious about legacy. They want to leave something behind. They want to know that their life meant something, that they won't be forgotten. And I understand that desire. But I want to challenge you on what legacy really means. Legacy is not a building with your name on it. Legacy is not money in a bank account. Legacy is not a title or an award or a photograph on a wall. Legacy is the way your grandchild treats a stranger because of how you treated them. Legacy is the recipe your daughter makes every Sunday because you made it for her when she was small. Legacy is the way your son handles a crisis because he watched you handle one when he was 12, and he never forgot the calmness in your voice. Legacy is invisible. It lives in the behavior of people who loved you. It lives in the choices they make because of the example you set. And you are building that legacy right now. Every interaction you have with someone younger than you is a deposit in a bank you will never see the balance of. But it is there, growing, compounding, outliving you by generations. You don't need to do something grand. You just need to be someone worth remembering. And you already are. My father, the one who stood in the frost on his 60th birthday, he lived to be 81. And in those last 21 years, he did more living than most people do in a full lifetime. He learned to carve. He made pieces from wood and bone that still sit in my home today. He reconciled with his brother after 15 years of not speaking. He walked every trail within a day's journey of our home, some of them more than once. He sat with young people and answered their questions for hours without getting impatient. He watched sunsets like they owed him nothing and gave him everything. And on his last morning, he told me something that I will carry with me until my own last morning. He said, "I was afraid of 60. I thought it was the beginning of the end, but it was the end of the beginning. Everything before 60 was preparation. Everything after was the actual living. Don't waste it." He didn't waste it. And I am telling you now, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever age you are past 60, do not waste it. This is not the leftover part of your life. This is the part you were being prepared for. Everything that came before, all the work and the struggle and the raising of children and the building of a life, all of that was just getting you ready for this. For the years when you finally have the wisdom to know what matters and the freedom to do something about it. These are not your final years. These are your fullest years. And the earth is not done with you. Not even close. There is still a song inside you that hasn't been sung. There is still a story inside you that hasn't been told. There is still a lesson inside you that someone out there desperately needs to hear. Open your mouth. Use your voice. Share what you know. The world is listening, and it needs you now more than ever.